Hello, thanks for joining me today. I am Angela from Fun in Fourth. I'm just looking down here making sure things have gone through and I see myself, so perfect. Thanks to everybody who joins in today and watches either live or on the replay. Today we are going to be talking about all things classroom library. So everything from how to snag some good deals when you're stocking your library, to the best ways to organize, labeling to ensure that your books get back actually where you want them to, and when time comes, how to introduce your library to your class so that they know how to utilize it and be excited to use it as well. So once again, my name is Angela from Fun in Fourth. Thanks so much for being with me today. So I'm just going to switch my screen here. Okay, here we go. So really there are four essential things that you need when you are building a class library. A couple of them I think some people would say are negotiable, but to me they are not. The first one, of course, non-negotiable, you've got to have books. The next thing is bins. This is one that some people might tell you, oh no, don't spend the money, but it's a huge piece of my library. You really need the bins to keep things organized, in my opinion, and we'll talk more about that. Of course, you need some shelving to keep the books on. And then the last thing, labels. I'm going to talk a lot about labels today as well. So, purchasing books, especially if you are a brand new teacher, you're going to start with nothing, and it can get really costly to stock your classroom library. And I want to tell you about some more cost effective ways to do that. Of course, you could go to the bookstore, of course, you could shop online, go to Amazon, Chapters, those sorts of things. It's really easy to do that, but it is expensive. And unfortunately, the way that many books, especially popular kids' titles, are made, they just don't hold up. The glue in the spine does not last. And when you're spending $10 a book, you really want it to last you more than a year or two. And some of them don't. So there's some more cost-effective ways that you can stock your library. And I think if you follow me on Instagram, you would notice this image from a few weeks ago. I scored these three graphic novels at a local thrift store, 50 cents a piece. The spine wasn't even cracked on these books. These are series that my kids always love. They go through, they fall apart so easily. So for 50 cents a book, I don't mind. And those just came from a local thrift store. Another place that you can get books fairly affordably is garage sales. What I like about garage sales is you often can find whole series of books. So if you hit up a garage sale where they've had a young child at the age of your classroom, usually those kids will have fallen in love with the series, the family will have bought the whole thing, and you can grab the whole series all in one go. The other thing I want to say about thrift stores and garage sales is I've found a few times where if I let them know I'm a teacher and buying them for my classroom, they'll either give me an even better deal or sometimes they'll give them to me for free. There's been a few times in the thrift store where I've had a whole bag of books and they have just given them to me. Facebook Marketplace is another spot that I recommend you check out. It's easy to follow at home from your phone and see what people have up for sale. Again, really affordable, like a garage sale, but online. And you can see lots of different things people in your area are selling, and they're usually very uh, well kept. These books, like they're not, the pages usually aren't tattered or folded over. They're usually quite well kept books that you can find on Facebook Marketplace. Scholastic Book Orders is another one I thought I should add to the list. It's not really a place that you can get a lot of free books right away, but over time it's a great asset to you in building your library and keeping your library stocked. So if you're not familiar, Scholastic is a book company, and you go to their website, sign up, tell them how many students are in your class, and they send you flyers. And then you, as the classroom teacher, send those flyers home to your students. Families can shop and decide what they would like to purchase. You place the order, the orders come to your class, and for doing that, Scholastic will give you, I guess you could call it a commission. So they have this thing called a bonus bank that they put money into, and you get more money depending on how much the families shop. And over time, that money can really add up, and you can get brand new books for your library at an affordable price. So it's not an option for building your library right off the bat, but throughout your first year, that can be a way to really help stock your library. Don't overlook friends and family. I'm sure there's a lot of people that you know who have books that they want to get rid of and just haven't gotten around to doing a garage sale or posting them on Facebook. And so if you speak up and you say to the people around you, hey, I'm looking for books for my classroom, they will probably just give them to you. So make sure that you're asking those around you as well. And the last one on my list here is retiring teachers. I know that when I retire, I am really not going to have a use for my class library. Might be a book or two I want to keep, but overall, it's not something I'm going to want to hang on to. So make sure that if there are any teachers retiring in your area, you look for their sales. Sometimes in June, at the end of the school year, you'll see that they do garage sales right out of their classroom, or if there's somebody in the building you're in, ask, because they might want to give you their whole library, or certainly at least a piece of it. You want to try and have a mix of fiction, so both novels and picture books, and also nonfiction books in your classroom. Not only is this going to help you have books for all interests of readers, but it will help you to have books available for all levels of readers. The other thing I want to point out too is that there is nothing wrong with supplementing your class library with books from your school library or your public library. Even 10 years in, this is something that I still do, especially for nonfiction books around units of learning that we're doing. So don't think that your class library has to be books strictly purchased by you. Use your school library, use your public library. That is what they are there for. Okay, let's talk about containing your books. So of course you could pick up these books and you could have some shelves and throw them on the shelves, all the spines facing out. This is what we do with our books at home. But I urge you to try and think about what that would be like for a child. So think about yourself in the bookstore for a moment, and you see these rows and rows of books with all the spines out. It can be overwhelming to know what you want to pick just based on that spine. And that's why bookstores will do little face outs of books and turn them out so you can see the covers, because they want to promote those ones. They want you to pick them up. And the way you pick them up is by seeing the cover. So the same should be true in your classroom for your students. Plastic containers are your friend here. When students can see the front of the books, they're more likely to pick them up and read them. And we can do that by putting them in containers facing out front. So here's just a little portion of my classroom library. And you can see that my books are organized in these bins facing frontwards. So yes, they can only see the front book at this time. But the other thing I like about containers is that the kids can pull the bin out and sit a little bit further away from the shelving and go through and flip through the fronts of all of those books. So not only is that spreading your kids out when they're book shopping, but they can flip through all of the covers really easily without making a mess of your library. So they're not having to pull one out, look at it, put it back. They can just flip, 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 flip. If you are purchasing bins, rectangular is best. You want to avoid any sort of rounded or irregular shaped bins. You can see how nicely these rectangular bins fit on the shelf, and the books fit really well in them. You want those rounded bins or kind of funny shaped bins. You're just going to have a hard time using your space as well as you can with them. So make sure that you're picking up some rectangular shaped bins. These ones here came from the dollar store. I've used them for almost 10 years. They have stood up very, very well. So super cost effective. I think they were like $1.50 maybe each. and they look like they haven't been used at all. Walmart would be another option for you if you're shopping for bins. And really good stuff. So I want to show you this image here. These bins I purchased a couple of years back. I use them for a ton of different things in my classroom. But one of the uses for them is I store some of my class library in it. So magazines, drawing and activity books, some of my nonfiction, they're in these bins. I just found that they fit better for some of the larger sized books. And I think you can get very comparable bins actually in places like Staples or the dollar store now as well, for less price but still just as sturdy. If you're in the United States, I think the Container Store is another option that you might have as well. And I'm sure that there's many more places beyond these four that I mentioned, but just a few options to get you started. My number one choice, of course, would be the dollar store. All right, so we have our books and we've got our containers, and now it's time to organize them. There are lots of different ways that you can organize your library. Some of the ways I just thought of were by author, by genre, alphabetically, by theme or by topic, or series. And of course, you can do a combination of the above as well. So my classroom library is a combo. It's by author, genre, and series. What I recommend you do is that when you start to get a decent sized collection, you're going to take some time to lay all of your books out and organize them based on what makes sense for your collection. So what I mean here is you really don't want to have a bin for space if you've only got 1 or 2 books on outer space, because what's going to end up happening is you're going to start going to those costly places like a bookstore and buy books on space simply to fill the bin, which is really not needed. So those 2 books on space might be better suited just in a nonfiction book bin. So take a look at what you have and what's going to make sense for groupings based on the books that you have. All right, here is a close-up of some books in my library. And you'll notice at the bottom it says labeling books. So that's what we're talking about next. I really believe that if you want to keep the books in your classroom, actually to stay in your classroom, you need to keep them labeled. So you have to label, label, label. And yes, I said that 3 times. That was on purpose. It's because I feel you need 3 different labels. So you'll notice in my picture that my name is on this book. I really recommend you put your name on each and every book that you buy. The label does not need to be as big as these ones here, but I do recommend that it stay on the front of your book. It's just a lot more visible. If the books go walking from your room, not everybody will think to flip open the cover and look for a name, but if it's right out there on the front, then they'll be able to see and know where it goes back to. It's so easy for books to end up in a backpack by mistake. If you send a kid to the office and they bring a book with them, they might leave it there. Or if they're injured and they're reading a book on the bench in gym, they might forget it in the gym. There's so many places your books could go. And so by putting your name on them, it makes sure that they come back to your classroom. You'll see on the bin that I have a label, and that label has a word that makes sense for the category. So in this case, this is a bin of fantasy books. They're organized by genre. But I also have a corresponding picture. I really advocate for the picture because not only is it going to help all of your learners be accessible to your labeling, so if you've got students who are unable to read or at a lower level of reading, the picture is going to help them to connect what the books are in that bin, but also it's just a much quicker visual form of communication. And let's face it, kids aren't always going to take the time to really figure out where things go back to. So if we can make it easier for them with that visual communication, it's more likely that they'll do so. And then the same thing as on the same image rather is on each of my books. And that's for that same reason. What I found was happening was even though I had labeled the bin, After kids had read a book, they weren't really remembering all the time which bin it came out of. And so books were getting put back in the wrong place. And since I've added that matching image to each book, I have virtually 0 books go back incorrectly. So that is a huge tip if you're wanting your books to stay organized, is to make sure that the picture you put on your bin matches the picture you put on your books. The labels that you put on your bins, you really want to laminate them just for durability. And then when you do that, you can attach them with hot glue for ease of removal. So if you're wanting to change your books out over time, I have many more books I keep in a cupboard in my room, and partway through the year I'll switch out what's in my library. I can just peel those labels off and stick a new one on. So I'm going to back my slides up a little bit here. That label there is printed out just on regular paper on my computer at home, laminated, and then a couple of strips of hot glue on the back, and I stuck it to the bin. It is there, stuck down great. It's not going anywhere, but as soon as I want to switch out, I can peel it off. It comes off really clean and easy. The hot glue pops right off the bin, it pops right off the label, and it makes switching things out not a problem. So anything that you are attaching to any sort of plastic actually in your classroom, I really recommend this tip for. I often get asked what the different books are in my classroom, so I want to take a moment and just show you what my current bin labels are. Like I said, I do have other books that I keep in the cupboard, and I'll switch out partway through the year, but these are the bins I had out at the end of last school year. So you can see that I have many bins that are just by genre. So there's a realistic fiction bin, fantasy, adventure, historical fiction, and so on. Biographies does fit under that category, but that's kind of a new one for me, and one that I would suggest you keep in your library as well if you can. There are lots of companies making really interesting biography books lately, and kids are really enjoying reading them. Scary books is a label on there that is probably could be labeled as horror as well. These are really books like Goosebumps, that sort of thing. I have a few informational bins in my room, so lots of different nonfiction. I don't have them sorted out into themes. I just don't find that I have enough space. Like I probably in my cupboard have enough informational books that I could do a whole bin on animals, a whole bin on nature, those sorts of things. I just don't have enough room in my classroom library to do that. So I just have 2 or 3 informational bins, and I switch out what's in them often. Magazines, activities and drawing, like I mentioned before. And then we start going into some more author and series types. So I have a whole bin for Captain Underpants, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, 2 really popular series at my grade level. Who Would Win books, those are another, they could totally go under the informational bin, but I have enough of them that I felt they deserved their own bin. Gordon Korman is a great author that I love, love, love his books. They are perfect for the grade 4 level, so I have a whole bin of his books. Judy Moody Instinct, Geronimo Stilton, and the list goes on. So, like I said, I switch out what I have in my library often, but those are kind of the bin labels that I have going at the moment. Now, if you are liking this idea of bin labels and you want a set to get yourself started, I do have some free in my resource library. So if you head to my website, funandforth.ca, and you scroll down a little bit, you'll find these 3 colored rectangles. The middle one says Resource Library. And if you click that button there that says Get Access, it's going to take you to this page. Type in your email address and your first name, and what's going to happen is to your email you'll get a confirmation email. You click that and you say, yes, I want to subscribe to the resource library, and then a second email comes through, and it's going to give you the link to my resource library and the password to get in. So when you get there, you're going to see actually a ton of free resources that are available to you, but one of them is the classroom library labels. So you can see here I put a nice big yellow arrow pointing to the image. If you click on that image, it's going to take you to the file in Google Drive for you to download. And what you'll find there is that these labels in two different sizes. So the bigger version being the ones on my bins that I showed you in those pictures, and then the smaller labels as well. If you, again, follow me on Instagram, you'll notice that I just made these ones not too long ago, and I made them to fit onto wooden paint stir sticks. Like if you are painting your house, you know, the big stir sticks. And what I've done with them is laminated and hot glued them to that to tuck in between books, similar to, I guess, a shelf marker in my cupboard as well. But I think that they would be great if you had different bins than I have, or even if you use those to print out and stick to the front of your books would work well also. So those are completely free for you in my resource library if you're interested. And I think when I'm done, I'll even put a link in the comments on this video as well, so that you can go straight there. Okay, I want to take a minute and talk to you about leveling books, because this is something I see addressed often. And my personal belief is that leveling books have their time, they have their place, they are perfect for your guided reading instruction. The classroom library is not the time or place for leveled books. So if you, again, think back to yourself in that bookstore and you're shopping for a new book, for me, I never think about, is this book too easy or too hard for me? What I think about is this a topic or a story I would be interested in? And the same should be true for your students. Not only that, but leveling books for you as the teacher can be really time consuming. They don't come with levels on them. Usually you need to go to a website and type in a portion of the text to get a level. That can take a lot of your time. And it's not even always the most accurate measure of the book's difficulty, because a student's background knowledge, whether the book has picture support, and just their interest in the book can really play a huge role in whether they're able to read that book or not. So not only does it take so much time, but it's really not the best measure of a student's readability either. The other thing I don't like about book leveling is that it can encourage comparison and competition between your students that's not healthy. It really shouldn't matter if I'm reading a level that is above or below you. And sometimes I find kids and sometimes even parents can be commenting on the levels that their children or that they are reading, and it's not a healthy way of looking at reading. Reading should be enjoyed, it's not a competition. And students just need to have this opportunity to make their own book choices. If we are constantly telling them you can only read books from this bin or these 3 bins, that's not real life. They are not going to know when they go to the public library or to the bookstore what they can pick up. They're going to be too afraid to do that because you haven't provided them the opportunity to do so. So that's a life skill that we need to model within our own classroom, in our classroom library. I do know, though, that in some places you are required to level your library. I understand that. My suggestions to you would be perhaps to only level a portion of your library, or to not restrict your students to read within a level if you're able to. Next piece here is designating a space. This is kind of the part I think people want to jump right to in their classroom library, because it can be that fun decorating sort of part of things, which we all enjoy. But I really do believe you need to have the other elements in place before you can jump into this one. So where you place your library in your classroom depends on the amount of space and shelving that you have. The other thing I could have added there is it really depends on the amount of books that you have too. So This is an image of my class library from my previous classroom. Honestly, it is where it is because it is where I had the space. The furniture in that room, for the most part, was all built into the walls. It was not movable. And this was the only part of that classroom that didn't have built-in furniture or didn't have a whiteboard up against a wall. And so I went with this shelving because it fit underneath the windows in the space that I had. In previous classrooms, I've had more of a room within a room, I guess you could say, for my classroom library, with the carpet and the pillows and the lamps and the books all together. It just didn't work here. I needed to keep the floor in front of that area open because it was quite close to the main door and to the coat hooks, so tons of people would be walking by. So just be thinking about your space and what you have to how your library is going to look. So you might want to create that separate area, but you might not be able to, and not one way or the other is right or wrong. I still have a carpet in my room. I still have those pillows. They're just somewhere else. One caution I do have for you if you are wanting to create that space within a space is that if you're moving your furniture to kind of create those additional walls for making that class library space, that not only is it safe, so that big bookshelf I have in the middle there would not be safe if it was out in the middle of the room. It's too tall, it's too wobbly. But also, it would be blocking my visual of my students in that area. So if you are wanting to pull some furniture away from the walls and create those little nooks, just be really aware that you need to be able to see your students at all times wherever they're at. So make sure that you can still do that if you're creating that space. All right, the last piece I want to talk to you about here is introducing your books. So you've got this library, you're so excited to share it with your students. It's day one of school. Should you say, okay, kids, it's quiet reading time, go get a book? No, do not do that. Using the classroom library is a routine. And like all routines, you need to teach it first. If you don't teach how to use your classroom library, it will not be properly utilized, meaning kids are not going to access all the books, and they're not going to put things back in the right place. I guarantee it. So before you let your students to your library, you want to have a discussion, a little mini lesson about the library. And some things that you probably want to discuss are, first of all, how is the library organized? How many books they can take at a time? My rule, I guess you could say, for that is I let my students take 2 books. My issue with them taking more is not that I don't want them to be reading a lot. It's that what I found is some kids will take 5, 6, 7, 8 books, and they end up shoving them in the back of their desk or like the books just get wrecked, and they're not reading them. That you can't read 8 books at a time. So my rule is no more than 2 books at a time, and that just seems to work really well for the kids that I have and the age that they are. You want to talk to your students about how to return books. So this is that moment where you would point out to them, here's the picture on the bin, here's the matching picture on the book, that's how I know it goes in this bin. Not all kids are going to figure that out on their own. You need to explicitly teach it. You need to have a conversation about when it's okay to shop for books. Again, there are kids who, during quiet reading time, they're going to pick a book, go sit down, flip through it for a little bit, go back, return it, pick a new book, and back and forth and back and forth. Especially if they are reading picture books. So having a conversation about when it's okay to shop for books and how frequently it's okay to shop for books is really needed. So for those picture book kids, I talk to them about, if you know that you want to read picture books and you know that they're a little bit shorter, that's okay, but maybe grab 3 at your desk for a time, and then at the end of quiet reading, you can return all of those. The other thing you might want to think about is having a book shopping day in your room, especially if your library is a little smaller. So having all of your kids going to the library at the same time can be just kind of jam packed. So you might say this group of kids can pick new books on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, or we only shop for books on Monday. Whatever works for you in your room and your routines. Um, but whatever it is, make sure you have those conversations with kids so that they know. Talk to your kids about where they can take the books. If you don't bring this up, they probably will. They'll want to know if they can take the books home. Some people let kids take them home, some don't. If a kid comes to me and asks me, can I take this book home? I usually let them. I don't have any sort of a book checkout system. My I kind of feel like if books go home, they're being read. So I'm not as worried about whether I lose one or two a year. But I can understand, especially if you're brand new and you're just building that library, you want to hang on to them all. So talk to your kids about whether they can do that or not. If you're using a book system, teach them that checkout system. Go through all of those pieces so that they know. Also, have a conversation about how to treat the books. Kids need to be reminded about don't fold the corners down, make sure you don't put your wet mittens from recess on top of them, don't cram the book at the back of your desk, and turn that conversation back around on them. Don't spend all of your time telling them don't do this, don't do this. Ask them how should we treat the books and get them to tell you, because they know, they just need the reminder. The other thing I like to do is provide each of my students with a bookmark at this time. So I'll buy a pack and just with a Sharpie write their name on the back of each one. And that really helps to not only keep the books with the right student, so if they leave it maybe on the carpet, but also it helps them to treat the books a little better. The other piece I wanted to point out to you is this post I have on my blog. And again, when we're done here, I will put a direct link in the comments of this video. But if you are wanting to organize your library by genre, then you need to teach your students about genres. So I have some great lessons for this in my TPT store. But one fun thing that I do at the end of everything is this book tasting. And so through this blog post, I go through exactly what I do, how I run it. But the quick and dirty of it is basically each table has a different genre of books. Kids spend some time looking at a book, making some first opinions about it, reading a few pages. They do a little response on that. They have a snack at each table. It's like a little one piece of popcorn or that kind of thing. It's nothing big. And then they switch to a new table. And at the end, we discuss which tables had which genres and why kids think that. So if you want to know more, this is the blog post for you to read. So that's it for me today on class libraries. If you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the comments, or you can always reach out to me by email, so angela@funandforth.ca. And of course, you can always go to my website to find out more too. So thank you again to everybody who's watched this, either live or on the replay. I really appreciate it. And I would love it if you sent me some pictures of your class libraries as well. So let's switch back over here. Okay, so thank you very much. Again, I really appreciate you spending this time with me. Have an awesome day.